You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror columnist Susie Boniface and the Conservative commentator Tim Montgomerie. They'll be with us right through until midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Mail leads with plans for a so-called amber watch list for international travel, which would give the government the ability to switch countries to the red list without warning. The Mirror describes the combination of COVID rules and upcoming bad weather as Hull's hell. The Telegraph understands that at the height of the pandemic, the NHS drafted plans to deny hospital care to people who were already in nursing homes in an effort to keep beds free. The Guardian says employers who won't give jobs to people who haven't been vaccinated could face legal action. According to the Financial Times, a group of Conservative donors known as the Advisory Board, some of whom have given as much as £250,000, has been having regular meetings with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. A Tory spokesperson told the paper government policy is in no way influenced by the donations the party receives. The Times says that more than half of householders can expect an increase of £150 a year to their energy bills, the biggest increase for 10 years. The Express says the government stands to make a £6 billion windfall from continuing to impose inheritance tax. The Sun speaks to EastEnders actor Sid Owen about his drug and alcohol use and romantic exploits at the height of his fame. And the Star has bad news for fans of pies and pastries. They could soon be banned at football matches. Shock horror. And we're joined tonight by Susie Boniface and Tim Montgomerie. We'll get on to that story about the pies. But let's start with the Mail. And there's just more heartache for people hoping, beyond all hope it seems, to travel and have a holiday abroad, that countries that they might be in could easily move at any second from the amber list to the red list. The headline there, summer holidays in Europe on brink. Tim.
I think this is beginning to get quite ridiculous, Gillian. I think we have ministers, we have officials who have acquired a lot of power during the COVID epidemic, and I think they're trying to keep their power really, and they're fiddling and they're tweaking and they're intervening too much. I think we either need to tell people who are thinking about going on holiday that it is safe to go to Spain or France or wherever, or it isn't. I just don't think there's going to be enough change in the next 2 or 3 weeks to justify allowing someone to go to Spain, for example, and then suddenly changing the rules and charging them £1,700, £1,800 to quarantine in one of these special hotels. Tell them now they can go, or tell them that they can't go. This constant churning, I think, is just too many bureaucrats, too many politicians trying to interfere too much in people's lives.
But ministers would say it's not about power. It's nothing to do with power. They're responding to the information that they receive, and they can only act on circumstances as they change, and they change all the time.
They change a little bit all the time, but not a great deal is what I would say. Sorry, I don't know whether you were talking to me or Susie then, but...
Come in, Susie.
Yeah, thank you. Well, they change according to one of variants. There's a couple of things at play here. The first is that there are new variants that arise. There are other countries where it's all very well for this country to say, hey, you can travel now, you can fly, it's safe. That doesn't mean the place you're going to is the same situation or indeed the same standards for what is safe as we do. The other thing you've got to bear in mind is that the people that are making these rules have never, ever, ever in their lives, as far as I can tell, ever booked a holiday in a year's time and had to save up and pay for it. They go on holiday tomorrow when they feel like it, when they just pay full price. So they have no concept of the fact that someone has paid in advance and booked a long time ago. And I have a great deal of sympathy for people who have been desperate for the past year to perhaps go to see another country, to see family, to see friends, see people they've been really separated from, or perhaps they've been stuck abroad because of work and they couldn't get back. Got a great deal of sympathy for those people, but it's been quite clear from the moment the Prime Minister said, hey, everyone, you can go abroad again. Let's all, summer holidays, we'll go off. I'll get a big red bus and sing like Cliff Richard, it was quite apparent from the moment that happened that it was a terrible, terrible idea, because it was done not because it was safe or because it was a fabulous thing we could all do safely, but in order to appease the tourism lobby and the industry and the jobs that he didn't want to protect through furlough for any longer. That's why it's all been allowed to happen.
So do you think that, as Tim does, that the government is tinkering unnecessarily or rowing back from a bad decision in the first instance, as you describe?
They've made a decision on the basis of politics rather than health or science or need. And then that's got themselves in a situation where they then have to tinker and change and go, oops, no, it's not quite what we thought. And they're just careering down the side of a mountain and trying to correct the course very slightly as they're going, ignoring the fact we are still careering downwards. It's the initial decision, and it's the mindset, it's the way they look at these problems, which is that the money has to be found from somewhere. It's not us that's going to find it. It's someone else that's got to find it. It's that fundamental difficulty in grasping the fact we are in all this together that has led us to the point where they're making bad decisions. And that we make one bad decision, you've got to make 1,000 different bad decisions trying to make up for it, haven't you?
Tim, let's move on to the Daily Mirror. Equally depressing. They're looking at COVID rules and bad weather. Their headline there, Holes Hell.
Well, can I make a confession, Gillian? It talks about August in the UK possibly being cool and showery. Compared to the heat we had a couple of weeks ago when I struggled to sleep. I'm a boring Englishman. I would prefer cool and showery weather. I, of course, would wish upon no one the kind of showers that led to the flooding we've seen in places like London, of course. But yeah, I'm someone who just really does struggle to sleep in the heat. And so if I did have the choice, I would choose the slightly damper weather. But as the Mirror suggests, for people going abroad in the search for sun, it may well be that they're not going to have very settled weather either. So the poor tourism industry, where a lot of jobs and a lot of livelihoods are involved, it's just another bad sign for an industry that is probably going to have longer run consequences from this COVID period in our history than almost any other industry.
Yeah, and the Mirror also looking at the fact, Susie, that Spain could be added to the quarantine list.
Yeah, and one of the lines that's really interesting in the stories this evening about the holiday chaos, and all things could get added to the amber list that you've already booked somewhere, and a couple weeks before you go, it gets added to the amber list kind of thing. There's also warnings that you could be abroad and in another country, and it gets added to the red list, which would mean mandatory quarantine costing £1,800 in a hotel room, perhaps with your entire family for 10 days on your return. So going abroad has always been a bit of a dodgy deal in this pandemic, and it looks like they're prepared to admit that it was a bad idea, put it that way. So I'll just be very cautious about going abroad, especially if there's any possibility that countries could get added to the red list while you're away.
Yeah, but it's so difficult now, though, because people that have booked holidays, when they look at the stark facts facing them, that they could end up in a red list country, do they cancel the holiday? Can they cancel the holiday? Because they're not being forbidden to travel. So can they even get their money back at this stage?
Well, this thing, if you are a wealthier person, if you can afford to work from home, then 1,800 quid in a hotel or having to isolate for 10 days is not too much of a trauma. It can be done. If you are in a lower paid job, if you cannot afford £1,800 in an official government quarantine, then you just have to not go on holiday because you lose your job when you come home. And that's another.
And as Susie was saying earlier, it isn't just people going on holiday. Lots of families now, modern families, are separated across continents. And so a lot of people, this is people, loved ones, people who are perhaps sick or ill, or in their later years, they haven't seen for 18 months. So messing about, you're not just messing about with changing these rules with people's holidays. You're messing around with people's ability to see their most loved and precious relatives.
Yes, no, very, very difficult for quite a few people, actually. Tim, let's also have a look at this story before the break. Stonehenge Tunnel that's been blocked. Take us into this story. And must just say, you're broadcasting from Salisbury, so you have some inside intel.
Well, I don't know whether I have it inside intel, Gillian, but I certainly have sort of, a real passion about this story. Stonehenge is one of the most extraordinary gifts from our, ancestors, from our history. And it's a difficult situation either way, because at the moment it's surrounded by traffic and pollution. And so the idea of this tunnel is to try and avoid the bottlenecks of traffic that surround this ancient monument. But the trouble with the tunnel is it's not just the stones that we're familiar with, I think are on screen now with Stonehenge. The whole area is a rich archaeological series of treasure troves. And there has always been concern that building a tunnel through this land would disrupt precious gifts from history that we haven't discovered yet. So I have, it's not good either way what happens in the future for Stonehenge, but I think this tunnel idea was probably the worst of all options.
Yes, well, the High Court judge quashed the plans to construct the tunnel for the A303, which runs past the monument. So that will be good news in your eyes, I can imagine. Thanks very much, both, for the moment. We are going to take a break. Coming up, questions over whether Tory donors have too much political influence. We'll discuss that next and more. You're watching the press preview with me tonight, Susie Boniface and Tim Montgomerie. Let us pick up where we left off. We're going to have a look at the FT now, and this story about Tory donors securing meetings with Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak, and the parties denying that there's any link between cash donations and government policy. Susie.
Yeah, there's a complete disconnect between giving money to politicians and politicians doing what you want. That's never, ever happened in any time of human history. We know about some donors having, over many administrations having access to Downing Street, both Tories and Labour, but particularly in recent years with Tories, with Leaders' Club dinners, and so on. If you give a certain amount, you are invited to sit on a table with Boris Johnson at a Conservative ball and things like this. And we know that if you give over a certain amount, you can get invited to regular dinners in Downing Street with previous prime ministers. What this is about is an entirely secret group known sort of offhand as the 250 Club, which is for anybody who has donated more than £250,000 to the Conservative Party. And it's not mentioned in Conservative Party literature. There's a minister quoted in this story who doesn't know anything about it. Not everyone in the club has given the full 250k, but those who have and those who are in the club get to meet once a month with either Rishi Sunak or Boris Johnson, online or in person. And in those meetings, they have used those meetings, some of these donors reportedly, to ask for cuts to public services, which of course isn't going to affect any of them if they've got 250 grand in their back pocket to give to a politician, and lower taxes, which of course would affect them and would also affect the rest of us as well.
Tim, just to bring Tim in there, this all sounds a little bit fishy, doesn't it, Tim?
I have to agree, unfortunately. I'd like to disagree with Susie on this. But look, I don't know how we finance political parties, to be honest, because there's no easy way of doing it. Political parties can be captured by big unions, they can be captured by big business, or they can be captured by small interest groups. And then if you have state funding, it means that you essentially get established parties, having an advantage over insurgent parties that can't raise money. So there's no easy way of doing this. But my main worry in some of the subtext of the FT story is that a preponderance of the money currently going to the Tory party comes from property developers and City of London interests. And I don't think that necessarily means that there's sort of a direct connection between a donor wanting something and getting a special benefit, although I'm afraid that probably does happen sometimes. But I think you probably sort of changes the mindset of the Conservative Party, the leaders of the Conservative Party. They start thinking much more about the property sector and the city sector rather than, say, manufacturing,
yes,
industries that are further outside of London. That's the real danger for me of this.
Yeah. Susie, we're going to change gear completely, and for the very serious issue of pies. Should they be banned from football matches? This is in the Star, the all-important question.
Do you know what? No, they shouldn't be banned from football matches. They should be served at Downing Street, and people who attend football matches should get to go to Downing Street to talk to the Prime Minister just as often as he talks to millionaires.
Oh.
And that way, maybe we'd have a Prime Minister who knows what the hell he's doing.
I love how you wove the stories together. Well done. Susie and Tim, thank you so much.